Hello, friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic with Adam Rubin. Adam is a magician, obviously, but he does a few other things, and he does a really great job of using magic and the magical way of thinking in those areas. He's been an advertiser, improviser, puzzle master, magician, children's book author, including being a multiple New York Times best-selling one. He's done a lot of incredible things, and in this episode, he really walks through how he's done it and how he used the magical way of thinking to get it all done. I think you're really going to like this episode. I know I did. Here it is, a brand new episode with Adam Rubin. Hello, friends, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the one and only Adam Rubin. Adam, how are you?
Not the one and only. There's a few hundred of us at least.
You are the one and only, maybe the only Adam Rubin that will ever be on this podcast, which is
okay. That's fair. That may be more accurate.
The most famous Adam Rubin for the Discourse in Magic podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Super excited to chat with you. You know, I had heard about who you were, and then I saw your presentation at Magi Fest, and it kind of like reawakened a whole bunch of like puzzle magic kind of love stuff that was buried back. So I'm excited to dive into a lot of that. Let's start at the very beginning. How did you find magic? How did magic find you?
So my first real memory of a magician performing was at my sister's 4th birthday party. I was about 7 years old, and the only real moment that I remember from the whole show is that this man took some milk and some flour and some chocolate chips, and he put them into a silver tray, and then he lit it on fire, and he covered it with a lid. And when he took the lid off, the tray was full of warm, fresh-baked cookies, chocolate chip cookies. It was the greatest trick I'd ever seen. It may still be the greatest trick I've ever seen. Now, this is how I remember it 30-something years ago. Just it's stuck in my mind since then. Apparently, the guy worked for my mom, and he was sort of a hobbyist and did this the sort of classic go to the magic shop, what can I perform this weekend sort of thing. But I didn't know that as a kid.
It's so amazing that that kind of like what can I perform at the weekend ends up being like your origin story. Like,
it's true. Well,
it's funny to me.
It's not really my origin story. It's sort of like my magic experience, right? That's the proto magic experience, because I didn't start doing magic at that point. I wasn't really interested. I didn't watch Copperfield or any of that stuff on TV. Like I was sort of half aware of what was going on, but magic didn't really enter my life in a major way until a few years later. I was probably about 12. I was at a summer camp, and my friend showed me a trick with buttons. This trick, he had 2 buttons, little plastic buttons, one in each hand, and he would close his hands, and he would move his hands really, really far apart. And then I would say go, and when he opened up his hands, one of the buttons had jumped across from one hand to the other. It was astonishing, and he could do it over and over and over again. I had no idea what the hell was happening. And it's a fairly simple trick. It's, you turn your hands over very quickly, and one of the buttons, you literally throw one of the buttons across, but it happens so fast you can't see it. But man, this trick kind of burned a hole in my brain, and I needed to know how it was done. I needed to know so badly. He wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't tell me. He was interested in magic, I guess, at the time. My mom had sent him had sent me a book, a little package at sleepaway camp. It was Mark Wilson's Encyclopedia of Magic. And I had given it to him. It was the cube, sort of the tiny version that's almost cube-shaped. I gave it to him just thinking I'm not interested in this. But after he showed me that button trick, I took it back. I was mad.
Give my book back.
I was mad. And out of spite, I read the whole book. I was fascinated. I remember just thinking, this is so interesting, all of these different elements. It spoke to me in so many different ways.
Was there any sort of earlier or other love for like puzzles or problem solving or whatever, or this was the sort of door?
I was always interested in brain teasers. They had like the special program for the kind of overly curious children in the class, where they would like pull us out for a few hours a day and give us brain teasers and geometry problems to keep us busy.
I was
So I
one of
guess
those kids too.
yeah, I guess that was sort of my first exposure to that, was those logic problems where the teacher would set up some sort of impossible circumstance and you would have to ask yes or no questions and use logic to deduce that Mary was a fish, and the bowl had been tipped over on the ground. And so that was probably where that came from. But the whole idea of the magic intersecting with the puzzles happened because of Brad Henderson. Really, he was my first teacher in magic. He was the instructor for the magic program at the summer camp that I went to, Island Lake, up in Pennsylvania. I was intrigued by him, intrigued by his performances, and then studied at the SYM in Stamford, Connecticut when I got back home to New York. Years later in college, I studied advertising and video production, and Brad hooked me up with a job at Phantasma Toys because he knew Mark Ducati, and by coincidence, not by coincidence, but I was lucky enough to be able to stay in Mark's apartment. He had 2 apartments in the East Village, and I stayed in his apartment that had this like case full of incredible puzzles, Harry Ang bottles, and these rare puzzles from all over the world. So that was Mark Ducati was really he was the through the looking glass guy for me. He was the introduction to that world.
So walk me through a little bit of the journey. You became interested in magic, and then you were never a professional magician, or were you for a period of time?
I was, yeah,
You
I
were?
was.
For
I
how
was a
long?
professional magician for probably like 6 years.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I used to do restaurants and weddings and bar mitzvahs. I worked Saturdays at Dave & Buster's for 6 hours a day, and I would work Friday nights 3 hours I would work TGI Fridays on Saturdays. It's confusing, right? But I would do 6-hour shifts at TGI Fridays every single Saturday for like junior and senior year of high school. And then I would work Dave & Buster's Friday nights. And then when I went to college, I didn't really tell anybody that I did magic. I was in high school. I was Magic Rubin. I hosted the talent show, and I was performing all over the place in the lunchroom and whatever. And people would see me. They would go to TGI Fridays and be like, "I know you." Yeah. But I started covering for some of Dan Fleshman's gigs when I was in college. I would sneak out. I didn't tell anybody. I would sneak out, like put on a sports coat and go to Dave & Buster's and do close-up magic.
Was going to college like a step away from it? Why did you go from being Magic Adam to just Adam?
I think it just got to the point where that was all people wanted to talk about. Like, this is my friend, he's a magician, or this is my son, he does magic, or hey, you're Nadine's kid, you do magic. Or like, that was within the first few words, people speaking to me, it was always magic, magic, magic. And I loved magic and I was good at it. And I remember senior year of high school, I won a couple competitions, and I had like a close-up act, like a formal close-up act with all these light bulbs and stuff. It was crazy. It was a cool act, but it started to feel one-dimensional. It started to feel like, is this all that I am, really? I was sure for several years, I was sure I was going to be a professional magician for the rest of my life, that I was going to build this business. All my friends were doing that. I was super close with Costa Kimlot when we were kids, and he was like, we're going to be professional magicians. I was like, hell yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I wanted to do with my life. I thought that would be it. But I don't know. It started to feel limiting in a way. Like, there's all those negative stereotypes that are associated with magic, and also people find out you're a magician, and they're like, "Oh, watch your wallet," and they put their guard up. They think you're trying to trick them. I didn't like that stuff at all. It's hard to fight against that. It takes a lot of effort.
Do you find that you've found a way to fight against it, or your way of doing it is like not being a full-time magician?
No, I say I'm a fan. It's so rare now in my life that somebody introduces me as a magician. It does happen. And when it happens now, I'm like ill-prepared. I don't know how to deal with it, really.
Right.
I'm like, am I? Shit, I guess I am. I don't know how to
You're
deal
like, do
with
I
that.
still have that title? Is it?
Yeah, I talked to my friend Adam Rubin, and I have talked about this a lot. Like, what makes somebody a magician? When are you a magician? When are you not a magician? My philosophy on that is, if somebody thinks of themselves as a magician, they are a magician. It doesn't matter if they know one trick or they know everything there is to know about the history of the art, but if they think I'm a magician and they're presenting magic tricks to someone, that's what they are.
I like that. I agree with that. I mean, I don't think there's any like solid lines like, oh, you can't do a double lift. You're still a layman.
By definition, it's subjective, right? You can't actually do magic. So it's just someone's perception that you've done something impossible. So something can be magic that isn't even a trick. You ever drop something on the floor and it disappears? You can't find it. You're like looking around forever, and then a month later you find it in the cuff of your jeans. Like that was magic for you.
Let's talk a little bit about advertising. So you went from like let's like high five Kostya, let's be magicians together, and then okay, I'm going to school for advertising. Tell me
Yeah,
about that. Was there
I
an
just was always
interest
a sort
there?
of an academic kid, so I knew I was going to college. I knew that it would be part of my journey would be 4 years away. I needed to get away from where I grew up to. I grew up in a small town outside of New York. Everybody had known me since I was a kid. Like I said, I was sort of had this sort of label, Magic Rubin, and it was a sort of minor celebrity. It was to some extent it was positive, but when I went to college, I went far away. I went to Washington University in St. Louis. I'd never been to the Midwest before. Met a lot of people from California, from the South, all sorts of accents that I had never heard before, and it really opened up my eyes. It was an enlightening experience, not just the stuff I was learning in class, but just the stuff I was learning about people and myself and the world, and just really opened up my eyes in a lot of ways, broadened my horizons. That was really it. I didn't do magic. I didn't tell people I did magic at all. I kind of hid it, and it was the secret. I would go to magic conventions still. Like I would like talk to friends of mine that were they would come and visit me. I'd be like, "Don't say anything about it. You're a magician." People started to
You're
figure
just
it
a
out.
regular friend of mine here, regularly visiting.
Yeah, they started to figure it out. They stopped letting me play in the poker games, and it was it sort of I brought it back into my life a little bit towards the end of my college career, but still it was not nearly the presence that it was when I was in high
Right.
school.
And was there anything about like advertising or what you were learning that was either like helping tickle that same part of your brain or at least like help complement that magic love or puzzle love or problem solving thing?
I think I knew I wanted to go into advertising. I don't know why. I read like a book about it when I was in high school, and I was like, this could be a job. This seems like it could be a decent, like you could get paid for this, and also it'd be kind of fun and challenging, and it may be exciting. I don't know why. There was this book called The Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads, and even back then, in like 2000, it was super outdated. I can't imagine now. It talks about like radio share and frequency and stuff, which I guess is still relevant in some weird way. I don't even know if it is anymore, to be honest. Like it's such an old media perspective. But this guy he was a great writer. He made it sound exciting. He made it sound romantic. He made it sound like you could use language to change people's minds. And that seemed interesting. So I thought, okay, I like to write. I like art. I always liked the combination of words and images. I would read religiously every day. I would read Calvin and Hobbes and The Far Side and the whole comics page. That was like my thing every day. I had all the collections, and I would read all sorts of graphics novels and Mad Magazine and anything that had pictures and words. It's just something about that collaboration between those two parts of those two different skills. It really was exciting to me. And so when I went to college, I was like, this is what I'm going to study. I'm going to study advertising, and I took like a marketing, like a 400 level marketing course. It was the only marketing advertising class I could find. And I took this it was me and a bunch of seniors or something in this marketing course, my first freshman year, first semester. And it was all group projects and slides and like pie charts and case studies. And it was so fucking boring. I was like, I can't do this. This is not, I can't do this. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I had a little bit of a crisis. I thought maybe I'll just study writing, but I don't know if that's a marketable skill to just have a literature or writing degree or something. If I wanted to teach, I wasn't really sure. And then I somehow found out that there was an advertising concentration in the fine arts school. And I had never taken a fine arts class, but I transferred into the art school. I transferred into the art school my second semester of freshman year, and I became an art student for the first time because I thought that would be a good move. So I did. I studied figure drawing and two-dimensional composition and 3D design and all these different things. It was so interesting, and I learned so much. But I also learned that I'm not an aesthete. I'm not a visual thinker. Like, I mean, I'm good at Pictionary, and I can tell you if a room is decorated poorly. But like some people, we had this assignment where you would the assignment was to take a bus schedule and just cut it up and make a compelling composition. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. Without some sort of communication, I couldn't just create something for the sake of the visual quality. It's not how my brain worked. I love going to museums and I love seeing good graphic design, but it's not something I'm able to generate. And I kind of learned that the hard way. But eventually I got into a major concentration, and my thesis project was a multimedia advertising campaign, television commercials and print ads and radio ads and all that sort of stuff. And I was good at that. I did a good job with that.
Is there anything from advertising? Like, one of the things that I noticed, and you mentioned it a moment ago, is you were talking about language. And I know that in a lot of the children's books, and we'll talk about this shortly, but there's some like really awesome and interesting and fun language. And I also see that in some of the advertising campaigns. So I'm sort of like asking, how does a magician who's listening to this sort of reach into that and pull out some of these lessons in language? Because magicians are like saying, like, everyone just says like, let's take this one step further, or whatever nonsense, like nothing phrase or whatever. So how can a
Well, I think
magician...
that's not quite fair to magicians to say that. I think, have you heard of Sturgeon's Law? Sturgeon's Law. It's a bit
Sturgeon,
it's a
yes.
bit pessimistic, but they say 90% of everything is crap, and sort of the more you know about any subject, the more harshly you judge the quality of all entries into that field. And I think that's true with anything. Magic's a small world, so it's easy to feel like you're on the top of the game, or at least near the top. And it's also easy to see so much of it that's bad. But I don't know. It's language is difficult, and for magicians it's especially difficult because in most performing arts, like, I could compare magic to musical theater, right? There's a lot of regional versions, there's a lot of amateurs that are enthusiastic practitioners, there's sort of this confusion sometimes, technique versus artistry, and people do other people's material with a little bit of a tweak and take ownership and blah blah blah. But in musical theater, there's a writer, there's a director, there's a choreographer, oftentimes there's a assistant director even, to help the performer kind of shape the performance. And magicians don't have any of that. You're just alone out there. It's very rare that a magician has a director, and let alone a writer. So you have to be good at all these different things, plus the sleight of hand, the technical aspect of it. So it's really hard to be good at all that stuff and become a well-rounded magician without any help. You have to be multi-talented.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I do judge pretty quickly because I'm surrounded by this stuff. But you're right. And obviously, when you look at the best of the best, you start to find not even just that are really good. You start to find them nailing that stuff, or at the very least, like, reaching out to find directors and writers to help them, make their magic.
I'd like to think that the bar has been raised, and that people, because we're so interconnected now, it's easier to find positive inspiration to go, shit, I want to be that good. I want to raise my game a little bit. I hope that that's happening.
I think so. I think there's a pressure upwards right now with the amount of magic that is being seen by the public. So I'm excited about that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the books that you've written. I know you've written 10 books, 4 of which are New York Times bestsellers. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So let's talk a little bit about it. You said you're an accidental children's author?
Yeah, it's true. I kind of like magic. I was all in on advertising for a while. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I got a job out of college. I did this ad campaign my senior year of college for Chaser hangover pills. It was this ridiculous snake oil they were selling at the time. If you ate these pills while you're drinking, doesn't matter how much you drink, you would not get a hangover. You got to read the fine print, though, because you're supposed to drink 2 glasses of water with each pill. So, hey, you stay nice and hydrated, you'll be fine. Keep in mind, it's the same company that makes 5-Hour Energy drink.
Oh, good.
So I got a job based on that presentation in Chicago. Moved to Chicago, got a job at this place called Leo Burnett, big ass, famous, old advertising agency. They came up with the Jolly Green Giant and Snap Crackle Pop, and they were the home of Ronald McDonald. If you watch Mad Men, they mention Leo Burnett in the show. It's just like, it's been around forever, and it'll probably be around forever. It felt cool, like I had the little cube. I got to work on Happy Meals. I got to keep all the toys that came in the Happy Meals. I would fly out to LA and everybody's kissing your ass on set. You're directing these commercials and doing all these tie-ins with Spider-Man and Legos. And it was cool. It was fun. It got a little tiring after a few years because it was pretty repetitive. And you kind of start to see the soul-crushing nature of the industry, of people that think they can express themselves creatively through this job. And really, they're just mercenaries. They're at the mercy of whatever the client wants to do. But I was into it. I was like, okay, I could do this. It paid well. It was nice. I liked the people I worked with. It seemed like there was a lot of opportunity to advance and expand. And meanwhile, I was studying comedy in Chicago. That was part of the reason I wanted to live there. I liked improv comedy in college, and I performed quite a bit in college, though I had no idea what I was doing. Formed an improv group called Suspicious of Whistlers, and we performed a lot, and we're pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of really funny people in that group, and it's still going today. Crazy. It's like 15 years later, it's still going. But I read Mick Napier's book, which is called Improvise, his first book. And I moved to Chicago to study with him. I wanted to learn how to do this thing. It was basically like playing pretend. It's like when you're a kid in the backyard and you say, "You're Superman, I'm Batman, the grass is lava, can we get to the deck?" And then it felt like that. It felt just as much fun as doing that. And I loved to do that as a kid, and I still love to do that today. So I was improvising. I was writing sketch comedy. I was writing like these ridiculous plays. One of the plays that I wrote was called Dr. Amazing, Your Country Needs You. And we were voted the number one thing to do in Chicago while high by Time Out magazine. So that was pretty cool. And a bunch of the people I used to perform with are on SNL or writing for SNL or have sketch shows on Netflix or, write for The Onion. It's crazy. All these people have gone off and done these incredible things. And meanwhile, I'm writing picture books for kids. So how the hell did that happen? Well, one day I was sitting at my desk at Leo Burnett, and my friend Corey called me up. He said, "Hey man, you got to talk to my friend Dan." Corey had gone to high school with Dan, and he had gone to college with me. And he said, "Dan's an illustrator. He just graduated. He wants to illustrate picture books, but he doesn't have an idea for a story. And I thought, you probably have an idea for a story. You should talk to him." So I talked to Dan on the phone, and we sort of exchanged portfolios. I showed him some of the comedy sketches that I had made, some of the videos, some of the advertisements, all that kind of stuff. And he showed me some of his artwork, which I thought was amazing. And I really wanted to work with him. He said he wanted to write picture books. So I thought, okay, I'll try to write a picture book. By whatever coincidence, I was interested in picture books. I had picture books. I was an adult man. I had picture books in my library, like funny, weird ones, some European ones, and some very dark ones like Tommy Ungerer or Maurice Sendak. But I really liked it. Again, it was that sort of word image relationship, the left brain, right brain complement. And I wrote a story for him. It was based on my dad. When I was a kid, he used to always have trouble with the squirrels in the backyard. So I wrote a book called Those Darn Squirrels about this old grumpy old man and these genius squirrels that would always steal from his bird feeder. And I wrote it and sent it to Dan, and he did a little sample illustration and walked into a portfolio review one day at Houghton Mifflin, showed them the manuscript and the sketches, and they said, "Okay, we'll buy this." And that was how I got my first book published. It was just, talk about slipping on a lucky penny into a patch of four-leaf clovers. It was, but I thought it was just a one-time thing. I thought, wow, how cool is it that I got to do that? The book came out on the shelf. I got to see it printed out. It said my name on it. It was amazing. Borders was this bookstore chain at the time, like the early 2000s. I guess they went out of business like 2010 or 9 or something. And they gave us this award. They gave us like an original voices award for new authors. And that was pretty cool to get recognized that way. And then we got nominated for a Children's Choice Award. Like, kids vote on that stuff. And we got nominated. And I flew to New York and met Dan for the first time. And we rented tuxedos just to be ridiculous. And it wasn't even business casual. And we lost. And the guy that won wasn't even there to accept the award. But it was still fun. And it felt like the completion of this thing I had done. And that was 2008. So now it's like 11 years later and 10 books or 9 books later. And I left my day job in advertising eventually. I was doing both for a while, but it just got to the point where it didn't seem like I needed the advertising financially anymore. Even though it was a good gig and it was a good career, and I was directing a creative department in an agency in New York. It was it just didn't feel like I was doing it for me. It felt like mercenary work. It felt like suckling the corporate teat, which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't need to, then why do it? There's so much more time in the day when you don't have to sit at a desk for 8 hours.
It's true. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the writing of the books themselves, because there's a certain quality that they have. And I'm sitting right here with, in my hands, Secret Pizza Party, and in the other hand, Dragons Love Tacos. And there's,
Do you have kids or you're just a weird guy?
I'm just a weird guy.
Okay. Welcome to the
I
club.
like to do research. And this time my research involved children's books, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
yeah, but there's this quality about the books that is, maybe, I don't know. Originally, I wanted to say something about breaking the fourth wall, but I think it's more than that. Like, like if I say being let in on a secret, I mean, it seems like I'm just referring to the raccoon secret pizza party, but there's something about it that, like, there's a quality that tickles the reader. It's like I'm playing with you, you know? It's not like I'm reading a book. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Well, picture books are interesting because everybody reads them. You think at first, oh, these are for kids, but they're not just for kids. Parents read them 100 times. If the kid likes the book, they got to read it over and over again. Librarians read them. Aunts read them. Babysitters, teachers, older siblings. And they do this funny thing where they say, oh, this book is for kids 3 to 5 or 6 to 8 or whatever. But you don't know. It's just a marketing ploy. So you write these books, and if you try to write it for like a 4-year-old kid, I don't know what the heck you're going to come up with. I don't have kids. I don't really know what a 4-year-old understands or doesn't. Probably each 4-year-old's a little different, just like anyone, any person. It's like saying 35-year-olds understand this and they don't understand that. And I do believe that. I believe that it's not something like, oh, kids like this. There's certain things emotionally they respond to. I'll give you that. Like, if you read Silly Billy's book, he's like inside their psychology in a very serious way. I actually learned a lot about how to present the books to children from reading his books, reading his seriously silly book. The guy really understands how to perform for kids. So what are the quality of the books? I guess the quality of the books is just I guess you can tell that I wrote them. I'd hope anyway. I try to put a little bit of myself in them, and I write, mostly I try to follow my own sensibilities when I write the book. I don't so much think about what's a kid going to like or what's a teacher going to like. I just write what I like. And if I like and it sounds good to me and it makes me laugh or it makes me think or it feels exciting to me, then maybe that's a good thing. I'm working on a much longer book now. It's like 200 something pages long already, and I'm just in the middle of the edits. That's what I was doing all day before I got onto this podcast. But it's harder for me because I don't know. You can't edit it quite as many times. When you write a picture book, it's like writing a song. You can do a million versions, and you try this and you try that, and you throw this part out, and you throw that part out. But if you do that with a long book, it feels like you're trying to build a building in quicksand, and it just keeps sinking. So you got to kind of, I don't know. It's more like making a sculpture. You know what I mean? You got to chip away at it. And I made a list of things I want to try that I think will make the book good. Like, qualities, a list, a quantitative list of qualities. Check these off, and the book will be good. But the list got so long. I'm like, you can't do it that way. You just got to go with your gut. You got to know if you like it or not. I think that's probably true of a lot of successful artists, is they don't worry so much about what other people are going to like. They make things that feel true to them.
I wanted to ask you about two of the books specifically because it touches on one of the things that you said. So you're talking how, like, everyone reads picture books, and it is interesting. Librarians read them, kids read them, people read them to their kids. Like, it takes place in the art on the pages, but also in our brains and things like that. And two of the books really stuck out to me as sort of existing outside of just the pages. And one is Robo Sauce, and the other is The High Five. And can you explain a little bit about what each of those books are?
Okay, sure. So Robo Sauce is a book that is about a kid that wants to be a robot, and he makes this special formula that turns him into a robot, but he kind of gets a little crazy, starts turning everything into robots. He turns his family into robots. He turns his dog into a robot. he turns the narrator of the book into a robot, and then the whole book physically transforms into a robot book, and the book becomes this shiny book, and you open up the robot book, and all of a sudden there's these pages you haven't seen before that kind of appear out of nowhere, and it's this very cool transmogrification effect. High Five is about a secret tournament that's held in the animal kingdom to see who's got the best high five, and the reader is invited to participate in that tournament and see if they've got what it takes to win. So they're actually high-fiving the book and physically interacting with the book and the animals and the characters in the book. So that one's like a lot of what happens in that book happens off the page. The thing they have in common is I realized once I started presenting the books in person, when I quit my day job, I was able to like kind of go out and even before that, I would sometimes get the opportunity to present the books to the huge groups of kids, like hundreds and hundreds of kids in a gymnasium, and I would read the books and I would get to see their reactions, and I would hear from people that would read the books and they would talk to me about these little jokes that they had or how they always point out these things, and they write me letters and see how their kid likes to count all the tacos out loud, or they put on masks like the raccoon. And I realized that these books aren't meant to be read silently in your mind. They're meant to be read aloud. And I always understood that quality of it and tried to find language that was fun to say, fun pacing and fun rhythm. But I realized more and more that they're meant to be performed. These books are meant to be shared with an audience. Sometimes it's just an audience of one. Sometimes the audience is yourself if you're like a librarian reading these things to check to make sure they're okay for the kids. But generally, they're presented, they're performed. And I wanted to try to give the presenter, whether it's the parent or the older kid or the young kid that brings in their favorite book to share with the class, I wanted to give them the opportunity to perform the book and have the book be there with them and sort of compliment them and give them chances to do something really cool or fun or crazy or surprising. And so that has been what I've been thinking about a lot with the most recent books, that interactive quality, that presentational quality, that the book is really just a starting point. The artifact and the object is empowering to the reader.
I wrote a word here in my notes, and it's world building. And it's that like this entire world is built outside of the book, like in the lives of people. You know what I mean? Like it's so hard for art to do that. Like when you leave the movie theater, you sat and you watched the movie, and now you're not in the movie. And this is like now you're just high-fiving with people that are like around you in person, not in the book.
My great dream, or my greatest dream for this book, High Five, which is the newest book, is that it will inspire people to actually have real high five competitions, because I could see it catching on like air guitar, where there's like a somewhat spirited level of competition amongst these regional platforms that then build to a national, and then there's an international championship that's televised. Like how cool would that be if you get these kids in teams of two that get to express their creativity physically, that get to invent their own techniques and present them to the world? That would be pretty nice.
Do you have a favorite high five technique?
I think my favorite high five technique is sort of context dependent. What might be perfect for one scenario might be totally tone deaf in another. But my general, like the one that has the sort of a special place in my heart is the Celtic knot, which is a 3-person high five that requires a little bit of advanced topology. And I got to demonstrate that on Good Morning America with some kids in front of Ginger Z in the live studio audience, one of the more surreal moments of my short life.
That's awesome. So about the Robo Sauce. So that book, I saw it for the very first time at Magi Fest when you were talking about it. And a few things jumped out at me. The first was that you used a magic technique to pull it off, or at least a technique that's, in magic, which is so exciting to me, because one of the things that I try to push a lot in this podcast is like using this amazing magic knowledge for other things, using them outside of magic. And that such a beautiful, glowing example of that. My questions are twofold. One, how did that idea come to you? And then two, how did how did you convince a publisher to build a book weirdly?
I feel like I must have said this in the presentation. I don't have a better answer than I gave then, but I'll tell you the story. I had written the book RoboSauce without this kind of fold out crazy origami ending finale to it. It was just a story about it. I like robots. I thought it was a funny name for a book, Robo Sauce. I love the idea of this kid going on a rampage and kind of turning everything into robots, and I really liked that. Originally, the story was the kid makes this Robo Sauce, he turns himself into a robot, and then he turns his dog into a robot. Or no, I'm sorry, he turned himself into a robot. He goes on a rampage. His parents sort of convince him not to be a robot anymore, and he changes himself back into a normal kid. But then, surprise ending, the dog licks up some Robo Sauce by accident that he spilled in the kitchen, and the dog turns into a robot, and that was the end of the book. And I went in for a meeting with my editor, and she had edited 2 of my books already at that point. She had already edited Dragons Love Tacos and Secret Pizza Party, and so this one was coming out. This was the next one. And she said to me, Adam, I feel like the ending is a little bit expected. It's too expected. And for me personally, that was like a slap in the face. I was so angry, not at her, but at myself, that I would do something that felt expected. I kind of pride myself on doing things that are not expected. And I don't know if it was just the rage that motivated me, but in that moment I had an epiphany. I saw it. I saw the end of the book. I saw the whole evolution of the story. I saw the mechanical solution for how to make it happen. And I described it to her. I said, okay, you're right. What if instead he turns the dog into a robot? Then he turns his family into a robot. He turns the whole town into robots. He turns the narrator into a robot. Then the whole world turns into a robot, and they turn the book into a robot. Not only that, but the book will physically transform into a robot. And she was like, calm down, take a breath.
Yeah, we don't have the budget.
Well, she just thought I was she
crazy. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. You say to somebody, the book turns into a robot. It's like, what does that even mean? But I knew, I saw this Z-fold wallet thing going on with this wrapper that would fold. I knew how it was going to work. I had the method already. I don't know how. It was there. And so I left the meeting. I went to Dan's studio. I made a little tiny version just to prove to myself that it worked, and it did. So I made a slightly bigger version. I made a video and I showed it to them, and they were like, "Huh, that's crazy." And they weren't really bought into it yet. But I brought the prototype to the publisher, and they looked at it and they were like, "Well, really, the only special thing you have to do is put a longer page in the middle of the book. That's it." The technique was really pretty simple. There was no sort of crazy production element that was required. They were generous because they got excited about the novelty of it, and we started to add all these techniques, like production techniques, like foil stamping and neon ink, and it turned out to be this really beautiful book. It's very unique. I don't think there's anything else like it out there in the world. If there's another book that turns into a robot or transforms at the end of the story, I haven't heard
We'll let you know.
Yeah. But that was basically how it happened. It was just kind of, sometimes you have a good idea. If you're able, I think half the battle, and I learned this in advertising, is half the battle is coming up with a good idea. And then the second half is convincing people to go along with it, or to either to produce it or to see it or to appreciate it or whatever. And those can sometimes be totally different challenges. A lot of times they are.
I can't imagine. It just sounds like such a incredible moment. Like, how about the book turns into a robot? Oh, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
But it turns out to be such this like beautiful thing that happens in your hands, like literally like a magic trick. It reminds me of the Klutz Book of Magic.
One of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah. I remember as a kid reading that and just like being fooled, like reading a book and like all of it happening in the book. And it just like, that's what it reminds me of. And it's so cool to see, that kind of thing.
Well, I plug it during every talk and every podcast I'm ever on, but my favorite magic book of all time is Marcetta Ducati's The Magic Show, because it's one of the few magic books that just does 10 incredible tricks for you and fools you with each one of them. And that book is, I got to stop hyping it because it's starting to get more expensive on eBay, but if you can find a copy with all the pieces, I think it's worth it.
Let's talk a little bit about Art of Play and what exactly it is that you do. It sounds like you've got the coolest job title in the world, puzzle inventor, puzzle maker, thinker. So tell us a little bit about what exactly you do at Art of Play.
So my official title is Director of Puzzles and Games. And basically what happened was, when I quit my day job in 2015, I found myself a lot of time on my hands. And aside from writing picture books, I'm a huge fan of impossible objects, mechanical puzzles, optical illusions, and all that sort of stuff. I've been going to the Gathering for Gardner for many years. I was very much inspired by the work of Sam Lloyd, and I have designed quite a few, let's call them magical objects or astonishing objects or something like that. These things that do something amazing, whether it's bowls that change sizes or cigars that disappear in an ashtray or a duck that changes into a rabbit. The idea is to make a magic trick that doesn't require a magician. Because to me, the thing that really sometimes bothers me about magic is the ego that's involved with a lot of the performers. If you could take the performer away, then you're just left with this wonderful emotion. There's not a lot of art forms that elicit that emotion, and people get to sit in it. It's like they do on the Carbonaro effect. He's not taking credit, so they just have to wallow in this amazement, in this sense of bafflement. It's something that we don't get to experience very often as adults. So I think people find it refreshing and nourishing. That's what's most inspiring to me, and I think that's maybe the thread that runs through all the different seemingly disconnected things that I work on. Is I'm going for that. I'm chasing that emotion.
That not discomfort, but like
astonishment.
you're
seeing it's astonishment.
Yeah,
that's what I'm going for. It's that's, to me, that's my favorite emotion, and if I can share that with people, I think that's what I'm trying to do. But with Art of Play, it's all about that. Everything that we have in the shop is something, it does something amazing or unexpected or surprising, or it is just this beautiful demonstration of a physics principle, or has this completely unexpected solution to a puzzle, or it opens up in a way you would never expect, or it demonstrates this motion that is completely mesmerizing. So when I quit my day job in 2015, I had this pipe dream of starting my own company and producing all these different puzzles and making all sorts of stuff. And I approached Dan and Dave and said, hey, I would like to make this thing. Would you guys be interested? And it just sort of happened to be perfect timing. And we were friendly before that, but we weren't necessarily close friends. We hadn't talked that much. And we spent a long time on Skype together, and it was basically a show and tell in my apartment. They kept asking me these questions, and I would be like, oh, hold on, and run into my closet and grab this thing, and ask me something else. Oh, let me go into the drawer and have this other thing. Oh, that Japanese guy, I just met him the other day at at this toy meeting in New York City, and it just seemed like it was the perfect opportunity to collaborate. They already had a really strong company going with Art of Play with the playing cards, and my whole thing was just coming in and filling that out with they had already created this vibe, this brand of this elegance, this quality, this heirloom quality, and this timeless quality to these objects. And so then the trick was, how do we find stuff that fits into that and really reinforces this idea of epiphany and astonishment and magic? All the things you can find in the world that are magical, but aren't magic tricks. When you find out how they work, it's only more exciting.
Yeah. Why are some things more exciting when you find out how they work, but some things are not?
You know what I think it is? I think maybe this might be true outside of magic. This is about just a general observation, but I think we're disappointed to find out how things work, how television shows end, how political campaigns are manipulated. We're disappointed to find out the method if the method is less clever than what we might have come up with ourselves. If we find out, oh, they were, dropping this into each glass of the whatever, like if it's something complicated or something unexpected or something sort of elemental, then maybe that feels satisfying. And if you say, oh, it's a string, or, oh, they paid a lot of money, or, oh, they just did this, then maybe that's dissatisfying. It's the classic example is that Gaetan Bloom. It's not even his trick, right? It's an Abbott's trick, I think, that he used to demonstrate at the Crazy Horse all the time, where the ball sort of jumps from under one glass to the other glass. And there's this crazy mechanism, and it drops out at the bottom, and you love it. And it's almost like the method's better than the trick because it's more clever and more elaborate than you ever would have expected. But if you say, oh, I floated this dollar bill because there was just a piece of string you can't see, that's not very satisfying.
That's interesting. It's interesting that like the method needs to be like more complicated than you would have imagined for it to feel, feel good to find out. Like sometimes when you find it a trick, you're like, oh, and sometimes you're like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah, right. And it's clearly it's a very subjective judgment, but with puzzles and optical illusions and some of these physics toys, the explanation is just it works. It just you can get into the details of it. And, oh, the contrast of this line makes your eye perceive the, but it's no less amazing. It's something. It proves the subjectivity of reality. That you look at this thing and it's not the way it's supposed to be, or it's not doing the thing that it seems like it should be doing. And to me, those are the little quirks in the matrix that are the most interesting. They prove that it's all an illusion, right?
Is there any certain quality or qualities that you are trying to bring forward when you're designing an object?
Certainly aesthetic beauty and quality of craftsmanship is a blanket across the board. I would never want to produce something that doesn't feel exquisite and look and have a timeless kind of design to it. That's definitely something that's been a challenge. I'm working on a specific project that I won't get into quite yet for Art of Play, and that's been the challenge. And we know what it needs to do. We know what the function of the thing is, but it's like, what does it look like? You can look all these different ways. What do we want it to look like? And as I said, that's not really my strong suit. Aesthetic generation is not my strongest skill. So I did a lot of research and looked at a lot of things that are out there and tried to see trends that feel fresh but maybe won't go away in the next few years, and try to make the best call that I can.
It's interesting that you found a way to, first of all, be so self-aware to know like the parts of creating and problem solving and stuff that you're good at and that you enjoy, and the parts that you don't, and find ways to position yourself so you can do like a lot of the stuff that you're good at, and then not none of, but limit the stuff that like really gives you struggle or that you
Well, it's just it. That comes from two things. It comes from experience, making as many things as you can, learning from your failures and your successes. And second thing, it comes with surrounding yourself with people you respect creatively. You learn so much from those people. You can't be afraid to ask for help, to reach out to someone who you admire and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. What do you think? Like, I'm always going to answer that email when it comes into my inbox. It's the people that are like, what do I do with my life? I don't know. Please help. I don't know how you answer that. But I think I've had this experience over and over again. It's why I feel such a debt to the magic community. I was 16 years old and I was doing this competition act, and I was going to the SAM, and I had a light bulb in the act, and I wanted the light bulb to light up in my hands. And Brad Henderson gave me Marvin Roy's personal phone number, his home telephone. I called the guy up on the phone. We'd never met, world famous performer and magician. And he spent an hour and a half on the phone with me explaining like ohms and amperage and all these extremely technical details that go in a shopping list for Radio Shack and all this. And that's the generosity that you get when you can connect with someone on their passion. It's one of the best things about the magic community is that you get, people say don't meet your heroes, and maybe that's true in some respects, but the greatest thing about the magic community is that if you stick with it, and I think this is true for any micro community, like if you collect rare butterflies, or you're like a master shoemaker, I bet you that if you stick with it for long enough and you're passionate about it and you care about it, you will meet all the people that are the best at that in the world. And if you're any good, even if you're just nice and humble, you'll become friends with them. You'll get to collaborate with them, or at least ask them for advice.
That's awesome. And it's also, I think it's inspiring for people who see themselves struggling in certain areas right now. And I love that you do things that are unrelated to magic, but you still feel indebted to the magic community, and thankful to like what they've done and what these amazing magicians have given. And I think that's like
absolutely. I there's a quote I heard from like James L. Brooks, and somebody said, he's a writer, he's a director, he's a producer, he's a comedian. If you shook him in the middle of the night, if you shook him awake and said, what are you? He would say, I'm a writer. And as much as I would love to say that, I wish that I was a writer. I don't think I am a writer. I think I'm a magician at heart. I think that's the lens through which I see the world, is this kind of disconnect between what you see and what's really happening. And it informs the way that I approach everything in my life. This sort of dose of skepticism that's mixed with the knowledge that any moment can turn into a miracle if you look at it from the right angle.
Yeah, it seems like, as flowery as this sounds, a magician is a state of mind, but I mean
Well,
that, like,
maybe it is.
being a magician is a way of thinking.
In the world of literature, being called a magician is high compliment. It's very high praise. And in the architecture, if they were to describe an architect as this guy's a magician, it's a huge compliment. It's only within the world of magic and the performance of magic that it becomes like less than what it actually is. Do you know?
Yeah, I think that word has been pulled in so many different directions that sometimes magicians, don't even know how to feel
Well,
about being called a magician.
it's I know I keep returning to this theme, but it's just the subjectivity of language. You say one word to someone and it means one thing. You say the same word to someone else and it might even mean the opposite.
So I wanted to ask you about career changes. It seems like you've bounced around and done amazing different things in different areas. And for some reason, when I hear about someone, becoming a full-time magician, I'm like, yeah, you can do it here. And then when I hear about someone becoming a full-time children's book author, I'm like, whoa, that sounds crazy, right? So talk to me a little bit about maybe the journey of changing paths and the self-talk, and then what you can maybe advise somebody who is on one of those brinks right now and deciding between switching or not switching or sticking with this or not or whatever.
Well, I'm not going to bullshit you. I've been incredibly lucky because each of the transitions that I've made has been with a serious safety net. Either I started doing the one thing while I still had this well-paying job, or I waited for the other thing to become, comfortable until I left the other thing. Like, I'm very much a look before I leap type of person. So I would say that may be my biggest advice is, you're going to have so much artistic pressure if you decide to leave whatever you're doing and try to do this thing that gives you creative fulfillment. Just start now. Start now, right at your kitchen table at night. That's what I did. It's like, people say, I don't have time to do this thing. Just stop looking at social media. Stop watching Netflix. You will have so much time. And you can do the thing. If you want to be a singer-songwriter, like, write those songs, sing those songs. It doesn't mean you need to leave your job as an actuary. It doesn't have to be a one thing or the other. I guess that's my perspective on it, is you can do what it is you want to do and also suckle the corporate teat. It's not black or white. Like, you can do both. If at some point it gets to the place where you can't do both, then you have to make a tough decision. But it's probably best if you plan for that and kind of make a longer term plan and slide into that rather than just making a leap like right away. I don't know. It depends on the person's situation, right?
Totally. I just wanted to know what your feeling was on it, because it seems like you are much easier to change paths than men. You know
Well,
what I
you
mean?
got
Like,
it. I think you just, part of it is about recognizing when you're doing something to get paid. And if you, to not invest, this sounds terrible, but like, you can't invest yourself too deeply emotionally. I guess it depends on the job, right? If you're like working with sick kids in a hospital, or you're fighting for people's rights in the courtroom, like, it's hard not to get wrapped up emotionally. But if you're writing ad copy for toothpaste, like, who gives a shit if they pick your first choice or the headline, or they change the word? Like, yeah, you want to try to make it good, but you shouldn't be losing sleep over it. You can't fool yourself into thinking this job is going to give you creative fulfillment. That's what your free time is for.
I love that. I love that. Even if your job is a creative one, the creative fulfillment, that's what free
Ooh, well,
time
that's
is
the most
for.
dangerous
That's great.
situation. I've seen so many people lose their mind and lose their inspiration and become lost spiritually because they fooled themselves into thinking that their creative profession was representative of their personal creativity. And it's not the case. You're being paid by some corporation or some business entity somewhere to make something on their behalf. They don't give a shit what your artistic vision is. They will use you to communicate whatever message it is that they're paying you to promote.
So what happens when you get into that transition period and your fun side thing becomes your new thing, and then you have to, where does that spare time creativity go when your spare time thing becomes your real
I
thing?
mean, are you talking to me personally, or are you saying in general? I mean,
I mean, let's say both. Let's say talking about like a children's book, right? Like on one hand, it becomes your outlet while you're doing other advertising things, and then it becomes your job, and you have to start, work. That becomes work.
it's true. It's true, and that can be disorienting. But I just try to keep other avenues open, other hobbies, because the hobbies, there's nobody telling you what to do. There's no pressure. For me, it's performing magic. I had a magic show in a basement in a comedy club in Brooklyn for several years, and sometimes I'll pack it all up and fly to London and do it at a convention in front of 900 magicians, and that's my hobby. And it doesn't make any money. It's not it doesn't accomplish really a whole lot except for like me having a lot of fun, and that's why I do it. So there's no financial pressure on that. There's no deadline. I mean, there's the show date, right? And I do put a lot of pressure on myself personally to make it good and try to do the best job that I can and be innovative. But it's a boondoggle. It's for fun. It's for shits and giggles. So that's how I balance when all of a sudden writing about mythical creatures that like Mexican food somehow becomes work. Then I start doing magic tricks.
Oh, that's a sentence I don't think will ever be said ever again. I love that, and I wanted to touch on, without really even saying any of it, that I really enjoyed your act and the end of it specifically at Magi Fest. And the
Thank
reason I
you
don't want to
so
talk about any
much.
of it is because I want people to see it if they ever end up seeing it. I know you said you've only performed it a few
Well,
times.
I've done it. I mean, I've done that act dozens of times, just only twice in front of magicians.
Ah.
Or I guess three times in front of magicians. The magicians are funny because what they remember is when you fooled them, and the rest of it sort of disappears after that, which is interesting. But it's the context, right? You're at a magic convention; they're there to be fooled, and so if you give them that, they're very happy. And I was very flattered to see how many of my heroes were just flat out fooled by the trick, and that was exciting to me because it made me feel like it's just such a weird metric to judge anything on, but it was definitely an ego
Totally.
stroke. It made me feel good.
Totally, and it's fun to be able to play on those other metrics. So I just wanted to mention that I really loved it. And if anybody gets a chance to be part of the fourth magical
Well,
viewing,
I'll do it once I get back to New
uh,
York City. I'll start performing again. I much prefer to be when I perform magic tricks, and this is a little bit of a personal preference, but I prefer to be the only magician around. It's supposed to be this special thing. It's like you go to see an opera singer, you go to see some guy like juggle on a unicycle, and you're like, damn, that's amazing. But if the whole show is a bunch of different guys juggling on different unicycles, all of a sudden it's like it's not very special anymore. So yeah, for me, I much prefer to be in a context or be performing in a context that's not where you'd expect to see a magician, which is for me generally comedy clubs and alt comedy theaters.
yeah, I like that, the being the only magician in the room. It reminds us again that it's unique. We forget when like all we do is jam with magicians and hang with magicians and perform with magicians, and we forget that it is like it is
Oh, you have
unique.
to take a step back. I think that's so beneficial to if what you want to perform is magic, go see a spoken word poetry slam, go see an improv show, go see stand up, go see a play, go see the opera because otherwise if all you see is magic and all that's all you're interested in and that's all you're consuming, then it just becomes self-referential. It's like this Ouroboros of artistic reflection. Nothing is new and it's all kind of feels stale and you get stuck and you're looking for something different, and you just gotta pick your head up and go see other kinds of performance.
The medication that's required for all magicians is other art forms. That's the medication that keeps being prescribed, and I think it can only do
Well, it's
good
probably
for
true if you're a
magicians
tap
to.
dancer too. If you're a
Mhm.
tap dancer and all you do is hang out with tap dancers and go see tap dancing shows, then your tap dancing is probably going to be kind of tap dancey.
Right, standard or
Yeah,
whatever.
those guys got to go see a magic show.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get some tap dancers to go see some magic
That's right.
shows. The last thing I wanted to ask you before we get to the wrap up questions is about writing. And what happens, or at least what happens with me, is the more and more I realize the value in my magic and in everything I do to sit and take time and write. But I didn't go to school for writing. I didn't spend a lot of time writing outside of essays in high
Hmm.
school. So I sit there and I start to like pull my hair out and all this different stuff. And before we got on, I don't know if you mentioned it on the recording or off, but he said today was a writing day, so you're locked yourself in a room with no distractions and doing all of your writing. Is there any sort of advice for magicians who are opening their eyes to writing and the importance of it and scheduling or anything like that to help us get to the other side of it and make it feel a little less hard
Sure.
or I don't know, that
No,
struggle?
absolutely. I've been teaching at Tannen's Magic Camp for, man, I think it's like, how old am I now? It's almost, I mean, it's 15 years, I think I've been teaching at Tannen's Magic Camp. And I get this question a lot because my magic is scripted. Like every word that I say, even if it seems like a fuck up or an aside or an improvisation, 99% of the time it's written into the script. And that helps me enormously. It really helps me enormously. And I have friends. Oh, I don't script. I like to improvise. And okay, fine, that's fine. But if you want to write a script, if you want to improve the words that you say and the communication that you're having with your audience and the just every theatrical element of your performance, I believe it benefits you to have a script. And the first step is to videotape your performance because you don't even realize all the things that you're saying. What you think you say and what you actually say are, especially with close-up magic, are usually very, very different things. You'll find that you repeat certain things over and over again. You'll find that when you look at yourself, even just watching yourself on tape, you'll immediately have a million ideas of how you can improve the things that you're saying and probably the things that you're doing too. But a lot of people don't even get to that step. You got to be self-critical. You've got to look at it objectively, see the videotape, get a performance. Even if you have to schedule a public performance just to get it on film, you got to do it. From there, you can start to make a script. You can write down absolutely everything that you said. And it can be tricky with magic, right? So like, do you write down the secret part? Do you write down the slight? Do you write down what you say or what you're thinking or what you want the audience to say? And David Ben from Toronto gave me a really good piece of advice on that. He does it this way. He writes out the entire script as the audience sees it. So every single word that is said by the magician, maybe some assumptions about what the audience member might say or the spectator or the helper might say if they're asked to provide a piece of information, and then stage directions in between the dialogue, like what are you doing, what are you seeing, but again it's from the audience's perspective. And then there's a second document which is basically a technical script, and if you've ever worked in theater it will look a lot like a lighting cue sheet. On the one side of the 2-column page you have the line, the cue line, so it might be something like would you hand me that glass over there? And next to that in the second column is the sleight that you're performing when that action is or when that once that line is said. So it might be, you could go into extreme detail and be like, contact the upper right corner of the card with your pinky and lever it up into classic palm position or whatever it is, full palm position, whatever it is you want to, however it helps you. If you're a very, very technical performer with a very, very technical trick, you may want to have really elaborate detail. If it's a parlor performance and it's something like, false transfer to the left hand or whatever, it really depends on your style, and you can make it personal and make it work for you. But having those two documents, it kind of forces you to consider very, very carefully every single moment in your show, every single moment in your performance. And I think it's illuminating. It really opened my eyes to how much dead time there was, how many opportunities there were to make things quicker or more compact or more efficient, when there were opportunities to say something funny or create a really humorous situation that benefited the method or benefited the pacing of the routine. I really think that videotaping your performance and then writing an actual script are two huge steps. People tell me all the time, I want to write this, I want to do this, I want to write that. They never even sat down to start to do it. That is sometimes the hardest step, but once you get past that, it's much, much easier.
I think that's fabulous, and I also think that one of the counterintuitive aspects that I often play with, and it's great to hear that. It's great to hear it being your advice as well. Is kind of like you need to have a rough script before you do it, and then when you watch it back, then you can get to the real, you sort of have to go up there and do your best with your script before you watch it
Sometimes
back,
you just
and
got to
then
go for it. You
get
just got to
your
do it. You can't wait for it to be
yeah.
perfect every time. You just got to find a place. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is like, where do you do it, right? I know that's for magicians. That's really hard. It's like, where do you do it? Right now, I'm learning how to read tarot, and I'm super embarrassed to do it anywhere in public. Like, how do I practice? I got to find somebody. I've been going on chat roulette and sorting through dicks for hours until I get somebody that's interested in hearing a tarot reading. It's fucking pathetic, but that's just how it goes. You got to find a way.
But it's awesome. You get to you get to put in those hours and do the rehearsals. And the last thing I want to ask you before the wrap up questions is about creativity. It seems like in all of the areas that you do, a big part of it is being creative and coming up with something that either has not been seen before, or is unlike anything that's been seen before, or anything to that end. Is there any advice you have for someone who struggles with the blank page, struggles with looking at the nothingness and being like, oh, where do I start? Where do I find? Do you have any advice for that person?
Yeah, you just gotta start. You gotta just start. You gotta just like one exercise we used to do. I used to teach improv performance in New York, and one of the exercises to help get people out of their head is just do the worst possible version. Just start doing what you think would be the absolute worst, and it will get you writing it, because it takes away that judgment. It takes away that fear. And in the creative process, whether it's in a corporate environment, in an ad agency, or it's in a publisher, or it's just in your own head when you're sitting down and staring at that blank page, like you said, fear is the enemy. And if you can get rid of that fear, then you will be much more productive, and you will get closer quicker to what it is that you want to create. There's a lot of ways to eliminate fear or to reduce fear. Some famous tragic examples use drugs and alcohol, but there's other ways too. Putting yourself in a place where you feel confident, going and sitting down at the table after you've done something that you're really proud of, or surrounding yourself with people that you love, or finding encouragement from a peer group, or even just watching something and enjoying something you really like that makes you feel excited to make something else. If you can get rid of that fear, like, fear is the enemy. Fear is the enemy when it comes to creativity.
I love that. I wrote that down as a little note. Fear is the enemy for creativity. As we are nearing the end of the episode, there's a few wrap-up questions that we ask each guest. So the first is, what is something about the 2019-2020 world of magic that you like that's happening, and something that you don't like that's happening?
The thing that I like is the magic scene in New York City right now. I think it's so rich, it's so energetic, it's like crackling with excitement and lightning, and there's so many good performers, and there's so many good public shows, and everybody's friends, and they're collaborating, and it makes me so excited to move back in September to be back home in New York.
Amazing. Is there anything you don't like about magic right now?
Is there anything I don't like about magic right now? Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna sound like an old fogey here, but the screen magic is just not my cup of tea. I think it's exciting, but I prefer like Zach King and Kevin Perry, who do essentially unabashed computer graphics effects or digital manipulation, but you don't see what's happening, and you're not really sure what's happening. It's something that if you were there in real life, it wouldn't look quite as magical, but it's still entertaining. And when that stuff starts to masquerade as like sleight of hand magic performance, that kind of bums me out a little bit. I also really don't like the magic market. I don't like the fact that so many talented young magicians, instead of becoming interested in public performance, they become focused on creating tricks to sell to other magicians. That seems like it just seems like very inward facing. It's look, some of these guys are incredible inventors, and I love seeing what they come up with, but I would also love for them to go out and share that, and maybe put a little more energy into spreading that joy and spreading that astonishment outside of the community.
I love that, and I think that's some helpful advice for people that are trying to release something, and maybe they should turn their efforts a little bit. If you have something amazing, then go ahead. But I always like 10 more years being in a product before it's released.
Or just forget about the products entirely. Like, why does it have to be a product? Why does it have to be a product? Like, what? Because what you're looking for there, and I was in that situation too when I was young. And my first effect that came out that was marketed was called Your Name Here. And it was something I performed all the time. It was like a blank name tag, and you would approach the table. Like I said, I was doing a lot of walk around. I would say, "Hey, my name's Adam, and I'm here to, how's everything going on with your food? Everything's good, service." And then they think I was like a manager or some weird kid in a tie. And eventually they'd go, "Hey, you forgot your name on your tag." And I go, "Oh, crap, you're right." And I wave my hand over, and the name would appear. And I'd say, "Actually, my name's Adam. I'm the magician here, and I'd love to show you a few things while you wait for your meal to arrive." And I put it out, and it was essentially for an ego stroke. I just wanted other magicians to know who I was. I wanted other magicians to think I was good. I wanted the respect of my peers. And at that point, they weren't even my peers. They were like my superiors and my elders by quite a bit. I was such a young kid. But now it's even worse because, like, with Instagram and all these digital downloads, like, it doesn't even need to be a physical thing. It can just be some routine, some slight variation on some other thing. And people are looking for recognition. And I get that. Everybody wants that. And it's easy for me to sit here and say, "Oh, you don't need, you shouldn't be searching for external validation." And meanwhile, I'm on a podcast where we spent an hour and 15 minutes just talking about how great I am, So it's not,
well, I invited
it's not
you.
exactly fair. Yeah, it's true. But the fact remains that it's a form of external validation, and it does make you feel good. It feeds your ego. And it's hard when you don't have any of that to say, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not important. It's not what you should be focused on." But it's true. And if you don't focus on that, and if you really focus on doing things that you love and making stuff that you're proud of, that other stuff will come.
I love it. It's great advice for people struggling in that creative or at the very least trying to set their sights in the right direction. The next question is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that should be on the podcast. So who do you think we absolutely must have on the podcast, with the caveat that you need to possibly be able to put us in contact? You can't just say the biggest name.
Have you spoken to Noah Levine?
Nope.
Have you spoken to Mark Setta Ducati?
That would be fantastic. Nope.
Have you spoken with Dan and Dave?
Yes.
Okay. Have you talked to Costa Kimlot?
Nope.
Well, Costa's thought a lot about the business side of magic, and I'm sure he'd be, well, I don't know if he'd be thrilled to share his insights with you, because maybe that's creating more competitors for him. But at this point, he's reached a level of success where he's probably happy to support those that are just starting out.
Well, those are three fantastic names, fantastic directions. The last thing is the take-home point. So we've been talking for a little bit over an hour about everything under the sun, and magicians listen to this while they're washing dishes and driving their cars and walking their dogs and whatever. And if they were to take the whole episode and wrap it into one nugget, one thing that if they remembered it, they'll capture the essence, what would that thing be?
Fuck fear.
Fuck fear. I love it. Fuck fear. Fear is the enemy. That's fantastic. Adam, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. This was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jonah.
And so it was really great. And no problem. And a big thank you to everybody who listened and joined us for another episode. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you next Thursday. Well, there you go. I hope that you liked the episode, and I hope that you learned something. Take a moment and think about how you can use the magical way of thinking in your life, how you can use magic, lessons you've learned in magic, lessons you do learn in magic, and how you use it in your everyday life. You think of something, shout me out, send me a message at Discourse in Magic on Instagram and everywhere else. Thank you so much. See you next Thursday.